Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Gordon Baranko. I'm a member of the this is a Bears Conference. I'm a member of the board of the State and Community Corrections. They're happy that you're all here. We're looking forward to providing you a lot of information that you will need for this Bidders Conference. Let me just start off with a couple of things. I briefly introduced myself to a number of you in the room, and it seems like you have been around here before and have some idea of what the board does. I also want to remind you that we're being live streamed today, so there may be some people who are being live streamed who can also participate in this discussion. The purpose of this meeting is to provide you with information on the grant program pursuant to Proposition 47 that the board and this agency is charged with providing. Let me first have the people who really do the work in this, the staff people who are present, introduce themselves to you.
Good morning. My name is Ricardo Goodrich, and I am one of the staff that will help roll out this grant opportunity.
Hi, I'm Patricia Ferguson. I am the program analyst for Prop 47.
Good morning. My name is Juanita Renata. I am with the Board of State and Community Corrections. I am the Senior Management Auditor, and my position serves as the Internal Audit and Quality Control Coordinator for our federal and state funding.
Good morning. My name is Colleen Curtin. I'm a field rep with the SEC, and I work alongside Ricardo.
As I indicated, the purpose of this meeting is to deal with the RFPs pursuant to Proposition 47, which of course is state law. As you know, our board is responsible for, among other things, reporting to the legislature and the governor about the progress that we are making in certain areas. This particular grant, which can be for adults or juveniles, is geared to provide the following services for local jurisdiction. I must address mental health services and/or substance abuse treatment and/or diversion programs and/or housing-related assistance, job skills training, and civil legal services. The applicants must be public agencies, county agencies, city agencies, Indian reservations, housing authority. The public agency that is requesting and applying for these grants must commit at least 50% of those funds to non-government community partners. The true purpose of this meeting is to give you all the information that you need so that your grant is pertinent and all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. We cannot write your grant for you. That would be unfair. But we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask us as many questions as possible. There are no dumb questions. Please feel free to ask those questions. Like I said to the staff people earlier, you're going to have to use the podium where the microphone is to ask your questions. I don't want to sound like Alex Trebek, the host of Jeopardy. Please make sure it's in the form of a question, because sometimes there's a tendency to give us about a half an hour hypothetical and then ask the question. We can't have that. Please, but please feel free to ask as many questions as possible so that the staff will be able to answer. I'm trying to see, Ricardo, if there's anything else I am needed for. This is just for your information. This is the Bidders Conference in Northern California, and there will be one in Los Angeles on Monday, the 28th of January. So for those of you who may be appearing personally or live streaming, there is another conference where the staff will make the same or a similar presentation. I think that is it.
Perfect, and thank you so much, and thank you, all of you that are here in person and those of you that are viewing online. And again, so just to reiterate, my name is Ricardo Goodrich. I'm one of the staff persons here at the Board of State Community Corrections that will be assisting with the rollout and implementation of the second round of funding for the Proposition Today, I'm going to talk you through a lot of the key components of the second round of funding. You've already received a great overview of some of the highlights, so we'll touch on those a bit further. And as needed, you may see some of our other staff contribute as needed. So again, we'll start from a place of not making assumptions. I know many of you are familiar with Proposition 47. For those of you that are, please bear with us as we go through some of the basics, and then we'll work through some of the more pertinent parts for you that are already. So Prop 47 was a voter-approved initiative on the 2014 ballot. And the intent of the proposition is to ensure, as you can see on the screen, that prison spending is focused on violent and serious offenses, to maximize alternatives for non-serious, non-violent crimes, and to invest the savings from the act into various grant-related functions, which we're going to talk about in greater detail. So right off the bat, we just want to highlight that the BSCC is one of 3 agencies that receives Prop 47 funded. So again, just by way of just some background information, California Department of Education receives 25% of the state savings. The California Victim Compensation Board receives 10%. And so what that means in its most simple form is that the state savings that are generated from the implementation of Proposition 47 are what is used to fund the various grants. So at California Department of Education, their grant programs are predominantly aimed at improving outcomes for public school students. And for the Victims Claims and Compensation Board, it's a greater focus on trauma recovery. And if you go to those specific agencies' websites, you can obviously discern a lot more about it. The BSCC, however, with its 65% of the award, our responsibilities are specified a bit differently. So again, we have to administer a grant program that's aimed at mental health treatment, substance use treatment, and diversion programs for people within the criminal justice system. There's an emphasis on recidivism reduction, which we'll get into a little bit further on. And also that services should also be provided to people who have substance abuse and mental health challenges. So in addition to Proposition 47, Assembly Bill 1056 added additional priorities that the BSCC has to incorporate into its grant program. And so again, there's an emphasis on housing-related assistance. We'll kind of flesh it out a little bit later on. Community-based supported services, which can include job skills training, case management, civil legal services. And then AB 1056 really important to clarify, as was alluded to at the very beginning, that adults and juveniles are both eligible for services. That's a common question that comes up, and that it is indeed a competitive grant program as opposed to, say, a formula. So for those of you that have received money from the BSCC in the past, you may be familiar with our model where we have an executive steering committee. That committee is comprised of subject matter experts, stakeholders, etc. For this specific RFP, we'll do a modified version of our executive steering committee, and still we'll have a score panel, which will be led by Jeff Baranko, who introduced himself earlier. The primary difference between the executive steering committee and the scoring panel is that the panel will not be charged with RFP development. So that's primarily what the difference is. But beyond that, the panel will still reiterate proposals, develop award recommendations. And again, we'll talk about what that means later on in the presentation, but just wanted to acknowledge that up front. However, something to be mindful of, especially for non-governmental organizations. If you're interested in serving on this scoring panel, you still are recruiting for membership. Existing law does prohibit non-governmental organizations who intend or who would like to receive grant funds from participating in that process. So if you are a non-governmental organization and you know that you may have a vested interest in the outcome, you may be precluded. If you're a public agency and you know that you have a non-governmental organization that's already expressed an interest, and again, you just notify them that there is this potential conflict of interest that should be mindful of. And again, that's also included in the RFP. But as it pertains to the scoring panel, we hope to provide an update regarding full membership by April 2019 or sooner. So please just check back to our website for additional information. All right, so for the duration of the presentation, I would encourage you, if you have it, to take out your RFP, and you'll see on the PowerPoint slide, for those of you that are viewing on the live stream, for those of you that are here, we have page numbers listed at the bottom of them. We're going to go through and flag a couple different pages, I'm sorry. You can only capture so much information on the screen, so some of it will be shorthand, obviously, but in the RFP, you'll have a kind of a fuller version. So again, just starting with the basics, the proposal is due on March 18, 2019, on January 18th. Your proposal packet will include several attachments, which we'll talk through later on in this presentation. But the important thing to know for now is that we do need, one original signed proposal packet and one electronic copy of that packet. And that electronic copy should also be signed. The email address is there for you, cop47@bscc.ca.gov, and all this information is also available online. At the end of the presentation, again, we'll show you where you can. Before the submission of the proposal due date, we also encourage you to please submit a non-binding notice of intent to apply. The notice helps us prepare internally for the number of proposals that we might receive. Helps us to do a lot of kind of behind the scenes planning. It's not required from you. Again, it's certainly non-binding. If you submit it, you don't get any extra credit. If you don't submit it, you're not penalized. But again, to the extent that it's something that you're interested in applying for, please go ahead and submit it. So again, I think probably the most frequent question that's come up already is who exactly is eligible to apply? So we always want to start by reminding folks that the BSCC is not deciding who is eligible to apply. This is something already spelled out in the penal code. In summary, it's public agencies. There's a full description that's before you for you to read. But just at a really high level, again, that's county entities, cities, school districts, rancherias, etc. So again, please feel free to review that in detail. If you are a non-governmental agency, again, that's a question that comes up frequently. You are not able to apply directly. Must be through a public agency. However, you can certainly, as an NGO partner, and submit, which we will talk about that over these. So again, this is the second round of funding for the Proposition 47 grant. So what that means is if you are an existing grantee, you are eligible to apply for this round of funding. And in addition, obviously, certainly new applicants are welcome to apply as well. Existing grantees may request funding to continue their current approach or to do a new unrelated approach. But in essence, it certainly is an open opportunity. It will be a competitive process, and all the rules apply, whether you've been funded or whether this is your first time applying. Okay, so if you look at page 6, you can start to see some of the details regarding the pass-through requirements, and again, some of the financial components to it as well. So again, public agencies are required to subcontract with at least one or more non-governmental organization. And in addition to that, there's a minimum of 50% of the total grant award that must be passed through. So again, as you're thinking about your proposal, so to kind of keep these things in mind, there are additional points that can be gained if you pass through greater than 50% of your grant award. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but again, just to tee it up to make sure that everyone's clear on what you need to at least initially begin the process. Joint proposals are certainly some things that are allowed. In essence, 2 or more public agencies can submit a joint proposal. At least one public agency must designate itself as the lead agency on the applicant information form. We'll go through. Public agencies may not apply both on an individual and on a joint application. Be mindful of that when you're considering which approach would make the most sense for you. However, non-lead agencies, may serve as a partner or more. So if you're, a non-governmental agency, you're not prohibited from being listed on a proposal more than once, but public agencies do have that restriction. So non-governmental organizations on page 7, I will just pull this out in greater detail because this was recently approved language at one of our board meetings, and it is a bit of a change from the last RFP. So, in a positive way, we think, non-governmental organizations must be organized in existence and in good standing for at least 6 months before entering into a fiscal agreement with the BSCC grantee. Prior, there was a static date by which all NGOs needed to be in existence, and that proved to be challenging for folks over time. So again, if you're a non-governmental organization, know that these are some of the criteria that you will be asked to meet. Other criteria, again, so you have to be registered with the Secretary of State's office if that's applicable, have a valid business license, and or any other state licenses or local licenses that are required for your business. You need to have physical access. And later on, there's a document that the public agencies are asked to sign off on that asserts that the non-governmental organizations that are listed do in fact meet the criteria. So just be mindful of that as you start even in the planning. And I should have said this before, but for the purpose of not making assumptions, when we say non-governmental organizations, it's a pretty broad list. It could be community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, grant management companies. Could be a pretty wide range. And note that the other criteria that's not listed formally here is that you should also have a proven track record working with the target population. So again, all that's spelled out on page 7 of the RFP, but just things for the NGOs to be mindful of when they partner. So in terms of eligible activities, so grant funds can be used for mental health services or substance use disorder treatment or diversion programs or some combination thereof. We really want to emphasize the or there in that you're not required to touch on all 3 components. If you so choose to, you're more than welcome to. You must touch on at least one of them or some combination if you choose of the 3. In addition, again, we're referencing back to AB 1056. Applicants are encouraged to, speak to supplemental housing-related services, other community-based supporting services. So when we talk through the rating criteria in a little bit, you'll see where some of this information pops up as well. So on the other side, ineligible expenditures. So for the most part, there are 2 really clear things. So grant funds may not be used to acquisition of property, and programs or services provided in a custodial setting, with the exception of outreach and funding. So in essence, I think what we really want to convey here is the intent of it is to not provide services in a custodial setting. However, we understand that outreach and range planning is part of that. So that's certainly an allowed component. As of right now, these are the 2 clear exceptions. Typically tend to get a lot of questions a little bit more technical around this. I would encourage you to submit those online. Through our Prop 47 inbox, and we'll kind of piece through and see how really technical component that you think may fit into something that's not protocol at this time. Target population. So again, this is spelled out on page 11, but it is people who have been arrested, charged with, convicted of a criminal offense, and have a history of mental health issues or substance use disorders. So that and is really important. So they have to meet that first component and have that second component of that mental health history or substance use disorders. To aid everyone. We've also provided a definition of what we mean by history of mental health issues or substance disorders on page 11 of the RFP. Locally, you may have a more expansive, you may further refine the population to meet the population. But again, this is what we've been providing folks to help give a really good start because it means different things to different. So the grant period. So again, we'll spend a little bit of time on this because it's a bit of a change, again, in a good way, we think. So you'll notice that it's spelled out in a few different columns. So the first column, and let me start with August, the grant period would commence August 15, 2019 and run through May 15, 2023. So the first 4 months or so, August 15 through December 31, is meant to be for implementation purposes. So one of the things that we found through our first round of funding is that the procurement process locally, the training, and all the different things that go into the initial implementation just requires some time. So it's essentially been built in now on this cohort. Now, conversely, if you do not require an implementation period, if everything's set up for you to begin business on day one, fantastic. You would just kind of begin as usual, and we will work with you on the reporting as needed. But if you do require the implementation period, so then there are 3 kind of clear service delivery years, and you can see from January 1, 2020 through December 31, 2022. And then on the back end, and is there a built-in data evaluation period from January 1, 2023 through May 15, 2023. So again, we will talk through, if you are selected, we will talk through these details in greater with greater clarity for you. But for the purposes of building your budgets, for planning purposes, just know that this is the initial guideline to help you. All right, fun. The reason why many of you are here in person. So pages 13 through 14, spell it out. Again, on the PowerPoint, we're just going to touch on the highlights. There's a lot of information, so I'll try to convey as much as I can as accurately as possible. So again, the grant awards from this RFP will be funded from kind of the behind the scenes, but from savings deposits in fiscal years 1920 and 2021. So at this time, what we have truly is a savings estimate with the actual numbers coming in closer to June when the June budget will be released. But again, for planning purposes, we're giving you some really healthy estimates to help you in your process. So that's it. The 1920 estimate is for $48,217,250 after the BSCC accounts for any administrative costs. Again, the FY 2021 estimate is not known or has not yet been determined. However, for planning purposes, we are assuming that the savings amount will be the same. Again, this is just to aid with the planning on your end. So that said, we think that approximately 96 million will be available in this round. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so other things. So you'll notice that we have 2 categories on the far left under project category. One that says smaller scope, one that says larger scope. So recognizing that different size jurisdictions have different needs, proposals will only compete against like-sized proposals. So what does that mean? So as you can see in the smaller scope category, you can apply for up to 1 million. And in the larger scope, you can apply for up to 6 million with a special set aside for LA, which we will get to shortly. So if you apply in the smaller scope, and again, that would be up to each applicant to determine whether they want to be in the smaller scope or in the larger scope. If you're in the smaller scope, all the proposals within that particular project category will compete against each other. And the same thing within the larger scope. For those of you that have received prior grants from the BSCC, where it's done by county size, meaning small, medium, and large, Please know that that is not the case here. You could be a medium-sized county by whatever metric is determined, but if you are only interested in applying for up to $1 million, you could apply in a smaller scope, or if you're a larger, traditionally a larger county, and you feel that you can comply or only interested in applying a smaller scope, again, that's certainly up to you. So as it pertains, again, sticking on the larger scope to Los Angeles. So in the original RFP, and this just says carry through with the only difference being funding, the County of Los Angeles is allowed to submit a single application for up to the amount that you see there. That's $18,616,627. What that means for the County of Los Angeles is that the county itself needs to, collaborate to figure out who or what agency from the county will submit that proposal. However, other cities and non-county public entities in Los Angeles are able to submit proposals. So, for example, if you're a city within Los Angeles County, if you're a school district, et cetera, you can still apply, and you would be applying, again, up to you in either the small scope or the large scope category. So again, I just want to make that clear. Within that larger scope, although it says that there's a set aside for Los Angeles, we also want to point out that Los Angeles County is competing if they're in that category. So if they're not successful in their application, then the other proposals in that larger scope category certainly are able to access that money, that ASU money. So it's not a set aside that has to go to Los Angeles. It's still a competitive process. If the county is successful, then that is the amount. If they're interested in applying for the full amount that they can apply to, if they're not successful, you look to the right, that full amount of $77,817,873 is available. Okay, financial leverage. So there is not a match requirement for this grant. However, public agencies are required to demonstrate, how they will leverage other funding streams. And so as an example, if you look at page 14 of the RFP, it does specify via Assembly Bill 1056 examples of the different types of leveraging that can be done. So for example, it could be drug medical treatment, it could be the Mental Health Services Act, it could be AB 109 funding. There's a pretty long list there. As an applicant, there is not a limit on what particular funding stream you may choose or how much you may choose leverage. But do note that there is a rating factor that is tied to the budget section, and leveraging is a component of that. And we'll just finish this slide, and then we'll take some questions. Some other requirements that you'll see are flagged in the RFP. For public agencies, there is a cap on how much can be claimed for indirect. Again, that's all spelled out. And then the other thing that you want to flag is when it comes to data collection and evaluation, a minimum of 5%, but not more than 10% of the total grant award must be set aside for data collection and evaluation. And again, in the RFP, there's great detail that speaks to the local evaluation plans, to your preliminary evaluation report, final evaluation report, where you would, in essence, be dedicating funding to. So I think we will pause for just a second before we advance to the next section and see if there are any questions from the audience. If there are, please just approach the microphone, and if there are any questions from the live stream. The slides available online.
Yeah, it's available on the meetings page.
On the meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you are watching on the live stream, I will take you through, and for those in the audience, please bear with us. Folks on the live stream are not able to see the PowerPoint slide. So if you go, this is for the folks on the live stream, if you go to the BSCC's homepage, on the right-hand side, if you go to meetings, and if you scroll down, I believe if you click on attachment 1, I'm not going to open it because it's already on my end, but you will be able to access the PowerPoint slides. So again, if you're online, go to the BSCC homepage, click on meetings, scroll all the way down to the Prop 47 Bidders Conference, and click on attachment 1. Okay, so here are no questions on that first component. We will advance to the proposal rating process. I would encourage you to look at page 22, which spells out where we're going to spend a bulk of the time for this particular slide. So we're going to talk about technical compliance, disqualifications, notifications, and we will delve a bit deeper into the scoring panel rating process. So the technical compliance review is an opportunity to correct minor non-substantive errors. So that, I mean, it varies, but for example, if let's say on your applicant information form, you have listed a particular amount that you intend to apply for, but when we review your budget table, the amount is in conflict. We may contact you to ask for clarity on that. If, for example, a signature that is required is missing, we may contact you for that. So again, the overall intent is to not disqualify a proposal for something that's minor. However, if you are provided an opportunity to make a modification, it's really specific to whatever prompt we provide you, and it's not an opportunity to make any substantive changes beyond that. In terms of disqualifications, the criteria is spelled out probably best on page 22. But in summary, we do require the hard copy or the electronic version by March 18th. Again, that's due date by 5 p.m. If we receive proposals where the lead applicant is not a public agency, again, as defined in the penal code, that proposal will be disqualified. If the proposal does not address one of the core requirements, again, mental health, substance use disorder treatment, diversion, or some combination thereof. If the proposal infers that services will be provided in custody beyond the outreach and planning components that have been allowed, it will again be disqualified. And so again, when we say disqualified in this space, that means that the proposal will not advance the scoring panel for review. So again, please make sure that you're really clear on the criteria that they're responding to. In terms of notification, the staff will contact you primarily only under these two circumstances, and that's if you've been disqualified or if it's for a notification regarding, again, any type of changes. We know that you're going to be very anxious to know the outcomes and how you've done. And as much as we would love to give you everything as soon as possible, there are usually a significant amount of requests, and it does slow down our ability to assist others. So again, unless we contact you, assume that it is fine. If we contact you, we will provide a time frame by which we will see clarity. For the technical compliance review, we will begin it pretty promptly. So once the proposal is submitted on the 18th, that next business day, we will begin the review process, and we will notify you if necessary. As it pertains to the scoring panel, so again, if you're familiar with our executive steering committee process, what I'm going to say is going to sound very familiar, but just with a different title. But in essence, kind of at a very high level, the scoring panel will read and rate the proposals, and they will make formal recommendations to the BSCC board at the end of the deliberations. We anticipate that the board will hear the recommendations either in June or July of the summer, June or July 2019, depending on what the board meeting is. Either date will not be problematic because, again, the grant is not anticipated to begin until about August 15 or so. The scoring panel will receive a formal training from the staff. The training will go through the basics, what's in the RFP, ensuring that everyone's consistent in their understanding and application. of what is meant in the RFP and how to score it. And we're going to talk about the scoring on the next two slides. And then the other thing that we also want to share, just to provide a level of hopefully comfort, is that if a scoring panel member identifies that they have a known or perceived conflict with a proposal, or in other words, that they could be a financial interest, a financial stake, or they have a relationship with someone, or it could be perceived that they have a relationship with someone, they're asked to recuse themselves from the review of that proposal. Again, if you're following along, please look at page 23. The PowerPoint just provides a snapshot here, just for visual purposes. It's difficult to capture it all without it being blurry. But the full, the full chart is probably best captured in the RFP. What we're highlighting here, again, please do look at the full chart. But what we're highlighting here are kind of three main things for you right now. So the rating factors, and they're numbered 1 through 6, beginning with project need, community engagement, all the way through down to the budget section. So these are the big picture areas under which the proposals will be rated. The point range is 1 to 5, and I'll show you a sample scoring rubric on the next page. But what we think would be of great interest to you, again, questions that we typically receive are, where should we focus? What's the most important? So I would encourage you to look at that percent of total value. And so you can see the areas where the greatest weight is placed. So for example, project description is worth 25% of a possible 100% of the score. Community engagement is worth 20%, and so on and so forth. So why am I flagging these things for you? Again, we often receive questions about, there's only so much page space. Where should I dedicate my attention? And while I can't tell you where exactly to focus, you can certainly use these as a guide to help you when you're crafting your proposal. And again, we'll talk through some of the rating factors in greater detail shortly. Other things to flag, again, at a minimum, 50% of grant funds must be subcontracted. However, if you are able to pass through between 60 to 69% of your grant funds, you will receive 2 additional points. If you're able to pass through or interested in passing through 70 plus, you will receive 4 additional points. If you pass through 90 to 100, there's no additional more, it's just 70 plus. Again, there are additional points. You're not required to. It's certainly up to you to make that determination if it's something that you would like to do, but we certainly want to flag that for you there. So again, the next page, page 24, you can see a scoring rubric. And so this is the scale that the scoring panel will likely use when they are reviewing the proposals. So again, questions that come up pretty frequently are how will we be rated and what will it look like? And so this is for the most part what the template will resemble. There's other information that in terms of things that would be pertinent to you, it's a 1 to 5 scale, poor, fair, all the way through excellent. Beneath that, you see the text that's in black, and that includes the specific verbiage that will be used to guide the raters as they are assessing if the proposal meets those particular prompts. So for example, we look at poor, where you can receive the lowest score would be a 1. The response addresses the criteria in a very inadequate way. And you go all the way up, let's go to the middle. You go to satisfactory, where you get 3 points. It addresses the criteria in an adequate way. And if you go to excellent, it addresses the criteria in an outstanding way. So again, these are the different elements that will be used during the rating. So thinking about now the minimum score threshold. So again, this is all spelled out on page 24. Applicants must meet both an individual and an overall minimum score. And between pages 23 and 24, you can see it. So we'll first start with some of the required stuff. So you must earn a minimum of 50% in the community engagement, project description, and budget section. And if you look back on page 23 again, you'll see the maximum points that can be earned. But for the purpose of this discussion, know that for community engagement, you must earn a minimum score of 5. For project description, a minimum score of 6.5. And for the budget section, a minimum score of 5. So in essence, you must earn at least half the possible points in those respective sections. And then there's an overall score that you must earn, and it breaks down to you must earn at least 65%. So again, you have to meet an individual and an overall score. The minimum scores must be achieved in community engagement, project description, and project description in the budget section. And then again, the overall, must be at least 65%. And that's in order to be considered for funding. Okay, so as it pertains to some of the funding decisions, again, what this will look like is the BSCC is going to create a ranked list of all the proposals in the small scope category and the large scope category, as we discussed earlier. And in essence, we'll fund the highest rated proposals that meet all the criteria in those particular categories until all funds are exhausted. There are instances where a proposal falls at the cutoff point, meaning that we may have, let's say, $1 million left, for example, and your proposal requested $3 million. In those instances, we may offer you a partial award. It's up to the public agency applicant to decide if they want to take that partial award. If they do, we can certainly work with you to revise, to some degree, the proposal if it would somehow severely undercut your project. But know that if you are on the cusp, that's certainly could occur. Other things, if they're not sufficiently qualified applicants to exhaust the funding in one category, then we will recommend those funds for the next category. So again, for example, we've got that small scope category, we've got that large scope category. We're going for the small scope category or the large scope category, either one. And the proposals at a certain point are no longer meeting that minimum score threshold criteria. Again, we will then offer, we go over to the next list and offer, and again, still use that rank list. So I'm going to pause there again, see if there are any questions before we go to the next section.
We have a question from the live stream from Marley. Can counties design a program that involves both diversion programs and reentry services?
I would say most likely yes, but I would encourage Molly to submit something if she has a little bit more detail. Any questions from the public?
Good morning. My name is Christine Bruckner from Boise City.
I was wondering if there's any kind of element of geographical distribution or regional equity that's being incorporated in the proposal awards.
Sure. So thank you for the question. Right now, the approach is truly just for small scopes and large scopes. What we found in the initial round of funding is that there was a natural kind of geographic spread, but there is not one that's implied. That said, we certainly encourage folks from all over California, from what's the most northern county I can think of, all the way down to Southern California and everywhere in between. Absolutely, please apply.
Hi, good morning. I'm Patrice Guillory with Health Right 360. So I actually have two questions. One, is there a formal period for submission of questions following the bidders conference? And also for existing grantees, is there an expectation in the proposal that we're to essentially describe how we might consolidate the existing service delivery and evaluation plan with the new proposal?
Thank you, Patrice. The first question, just in case it wasn't clear on the live stream, is there a formal period, follow-up period for submitting Q&A? So yes, we'll take questions up through February 28th, and we will post questions on our website as frequently as we can, but up to March 4th, 2019. So basically up to 2 weeks before the proposals are due, we will post. And I don't know how often we will post. I think in the past we may have done either 2 or 3 updates once we have enough substantive questions, but we will absolutely post them on our website. Um, and in terms of existing grantees and the question about how to incorporate kind of new approaches and kind of existing approaches, I think there's a good deal amount of latitude that you have. I would first start by saying though that it really is a unique round of funding, and so at a minimum, because there is a page length which we'll talk about shortly, make sure that you address all the criteria that you can within the, I want to say, the 15-page limit in the program narrative section. And if you think that there are times that it's appropriate to reference, here's what we're currently doing, and here's how this new funding would supplement it, that's certainly within your right. But as long as at a minimum you address all the criterion that's in the rating factors, I would just hate for you to um, assume things, because the scoring panel, for all intents and purposes, they're not considering past performance. It's truly going to be whatever is in that proposal. But if you think there's something there that will help boost your case and can be tied to a rating factor, by all means, I think you should view it through that lens.
We have another question from the live chat from Ray. He's asking for the details on the Monday morning meeting in LA.
Perfect. Thank you. Ray, I will do you one better. And not only will I tell you the details, but I'm going to show you where you can access them, because I assume other folks may have the same question. So again, I'm on the BSCC website. If you scroll down just about midway and you click on the Prop 47 banner, and if you scroll down, the very first tab, which is labeled 2019 RFP, and there's the grant cycle in the header. If you scroll down about midway, you're going to see a title for Bidders Conferences, and then you're going to see Los Angeles. So again, it's Monday the 28th at 9:30 a.m. And we've also included a hyperlink to a map in the event that that is easier for you to access. Other questions I've received, there is not an RSVP is not required also. Any other live stream questions? Okay, great. So we will continue with the next portion. And so what we're going to do for the next few slides is just to do a really brief overview of the attachments. Again, if you're following along, this will be a bit kind of fast paced. But again, if there's questions, once we get to the very last attachment, you're certainly welcome to pose any questions. So the first attachment on page 27 is the proposition itself. Again, throughout the RFP, we've taken the salient points and we've embedded them, but you're more than welcome to read through the parts that are applicable to you. On page 29, there's greater detail on AB 1056. Again, AB 1056 is the component that added additional information. So it requires that it's a competitive grant program, that housing-related needs be considered, that supportive services be considered. And again, there's additional information that you can read through in greater detail. Attachment C begins on page 35. We think this is helpful. The original executive steering committee created a glossary of key terms. And again, our kind of caveat to everyone is you may use different terminology. Again, it's meant to be a guide. So again, just to flag a few of them that are listed, there's definitions for cultural competence. I know that that's something that we've received questions on in the past about what does that mean? What does it look like? So there is some guidance that's provided there. And to the extent possible, we've also cited sources if it was not something created by the executive steering committee and or staff. Definitions for diversion programs. On housing, again, there are lots of questions about housing and the different types of housing models that can be considered, whether it be bridge housing, rapid rehousing. So again, just kind of preemptive, some of the questions that we've received is if there's a particular type of housing model that must be used, be it housing first, sober living only, bridge housing, et cetera. So again, just gonna ask you to please review the rating criteria and then design your project with those kind of rating factors in mind. If you think it's something that will be make a significant difference, we don't specify that you have to use a particular approach, but we do want to provide definitions to guide you. If you go to, let's see, page 42, you will see the Prop 47 Local Advisory Committee roster. So again, one of the things that is a component of the grant is that the local advisory committee, it convenes. And part of what the advisory committee does is it helps through the duration of the grant on several kind of key aspects. But one of the things that we ask for upfront is to get a list of the membership. So please do review the criteria that's there and complete that. On the very next page on the attachments, attachment E, that's the local advisory committee letter of agreement. And so in essence, again, with the roster on the next page and with the letter, the committee basically agrees to use a collaborative approach in its decision making. And then that at a minimum, it will identify and prioritize needs, identify strategies to address those needs, and so on and so forth. So again, what we provided is a letter template for you. Certainly, please review it. It needs to be completed by the lead agency and then all the members on the local advisory committee. Again, there are prompts on the form to assist you as well. But please do take a look at that. Page 44, again, attachment F now. These are the local government impact letters. And so again, we certainly want to acknowledge that this grant program may have an impact, positive, negative, or somewhere in between. And so we ask that a government impact letter is submitted. There's not a specific format for it. However, we do identify some of the basic criterion that we do want you to include. So it speaks to, again, the name of the project and a brief description, how the project, might impact other public agencies, and then, what will be done to work through those potential impacts. And again, you're certainly welcome if, as you're starting to digest this, you have follow-up questions, to email them to us and we'll be able to assist you. But again, we certainly wanted to flag this for you as well. Attachment G, which begins on page 45 and is several pages long, is a sample grant agreement. If you are successful, this is some version of what your grant agreement with the BSCC will look like. Again, it truly is sample, but it will give you a good idea of the expectations. Most of it is some of the required state contracting language that you'll see, but there are also other details that will probably stay static. So for example, there are reporting dates and things of that nature. So again, if you are curious to understand what your commitment would look like, by and large, we would encourage those public agency applicants to look through that. Attachment H on page 62 is a sample governing board resolution. This is something that is required before you get into grant agreement. The reason we've included it kind of now at the onset is we recognize that in some places it may be difficult to get before your board. So if you are interested, you are more than welcome to submit this at the time of application. If you would prefer to wait until you actually have and are successful in your proposal and provide it then, you're welcome to. Again, we just are acknowledging that in some places it takes a while to get before your board, and it's an option that's there for you as well. Page 63 includes a project work plan. One of the things that applicants are asked to do is to, at a minimum, identify 3 goals, and with each goal an accompanying objective, and then just an outline of some of the activities that will be completed in support of those goals and objectives. Again, please take your time and really think it through. Consider the start dates, the end dates. We ask that you make it reasonable, realistic, and practical, because again, if you're successful, these are some of the elements that you will be held to. Attachment J on page 64, it's a space for you to list the partner agencies and organizations. It gives us a good sense at the onset, if they're known, who some of your non-governmental partners are. Again, if it's not known, we certainly understand that. You can list that in that particular space as well. Page 65 is that non-governmental assurance. We talked earlier about what some of that criteria looked like, and if you might remember, that's what we spoke about. Organizations needing to be in existence for at least 6 months and in good standing, and we kind of went through some other bulleted items. So page 65, and then it flips over to page 66, is the criteria that we ask, again, those non-governmental organizations to meet. And then it also must be signed by the lead public agency. So again, you can see that there. If the non-governmental organizations are not known at the time of applications, again, it can be for valid reasons. It could be that your local process prohibits you from listing folks until you go out to bid. We absolutely understand that. Please just note in those instances, and we will proceed accordingly. And attachment L is on the website. I will just bring it up briefly. So again, from the BSCC webpage, if you just scroll down, it says the budget attachment, it's right there. I happen to have it up on my screen already, so I'm just going to open it. But again, just for the purposes of displaying, again, this is the sample budget page, and we will come back to this shortly. But to know that there is the actual proposal, and then there's also a budget attachment that must be completed. Are there any questions?
From the live stream, Susie asks, what if a small county does not have a viable NGO to collaborate with? Does the lack of an NGO make a county ineligible? Are there exceptions?
All applicants, I would say in general, Susie, are required to subcontract with a non-governmental organization. I'd encourage you to send us an email though, because it seems like you may have maybe a specific scenario in mind. Although we can't really walk you through all of the details. We could try to see what might be feasible, but by and large, you are required to subcontract with non-governmental organizations. Any other questions?
Christine Barker again. So as I'm really struck by how the BSCC is really encouraging us to collaborate, to develop proposals, to include people from outside traditional justice partners in this advisory council. And then we're also, so that should kind of guide the proposal, guide the target population, guide all of the kind of decisions along the way. But how do we avoid conflicts in terms of who sits on the advisory if we haven't finalized the proposal? Do you have any words of wisdom from the first round on how to walk that line? Or
we have words
avoid
of
the
wisdom.
line?
I don't know how much you'll like them, but we do have words of wisdom. Our unfortunate, but I think that the safe stance we've had to take is it really is kind of a local conversation because our conflict of interests rules, for example, really kind of pertain to our scoring panel members. And so what we're asking them to do, so I'll give you kind of a roundabout answer and see if it might be applicable. What we're asking them to do is if they think that they could have an interest in it, to be mindful of that and that they may not want to participate if they're a non-governmental organization, which is exactly kind of what you're speaking to. And I think that's, from what I recall, on on the first go around, that was exactly what occurred, is that locally, folks got together and talked about, is it more important for us to help guide this conversation? And or is it more important for us to be a part of, if we're successful, providing services? And as you said, I mean, it really is such a tricky line, because we acknowledge that folks, they want to help, but, to what cost? But, to the extent that you can, it's a great question for local council to ask. Here, as a public agency, here's what we're considering. Here are the NGOs that have expressed interest. What concerns or reservations would you have? And then we'll defer to you on that particular one.
Thank you.
Hello, Patrice Guillory again. This is in reference to page 11 in your definition of the target population. The last bullet point, you have that a person with a history of mental health issues or substance abuse is considered as one who has been regarded as having mental health issues or substance use disorder. How are you all defining regarded? Is this a formal diagnosis?
I don't think it was a formal diagnosis in the first round, but I can check. I don't think the question popped up in the first round, but I can check and get back to you. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Ricardo, if I could add to that, I believe that that language was added in the last round to allow for family members family members who would refer an individual for services who believe that that person has a mental health issue. So it regarded by family members or friends or others, I think is an acceptable, it meets the criteria as long as it's documented that way.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, we are getting closer. So if you look at page 70, pages 70 through 87 for the kind of duration of this part, we're just going to go through the proposal checklist, and then go through some of, again, some of the rating factors just at a really high level, and then we will go from there. So again, page 70 has the proposal checklist. So we just went through the list of attachments. And then what we ask that you do is that you submit this proposal checklist as a part of the proposal packet. It asks that you check, I guess a really safe, feel-safe way to ensure that you've submitted the required documents, that you admitted the page limits. It includes the attachments that are required, and it also references the attachments that are optional. So please make sure that that is submitted. And again, the required attachments are attachments D, E, F, I, J, K, and L. So certainly be mindful of that when you're preparing. As far as the applicant information form, I think there are just a few things that we wanted to flag for you. So again, please be clear on who the lead public agency is. Include a project title, and just a note of personal preference. I think we found that folks that have been successful, sometimes they just have a very generic name and then they regret it. Like, oh, so-and-so Prop 47. So I'll just say, if you are successful, that is the name that will be used when we publish and share other information. So just don't treat it like any other field. You may regret later on having a generic name. So again, just point of personal preference from folks who've gone down that road. Again, if you're looking at the form under required services, again, because we have disqualification criteria, please be clear with D and E that you're checking the services that you're providing. Again, whether it's mental health, substance use, diversion, et cetera. That will also aid us later on in the process. And then on F, the last thing I'll highlight on this particular form, which is the project summary. Again, this will be used. So if you are going to provide a summary, we just ask that you try to be grammatically correct. Try to provide enough of a synopsis that if someone was reading it, they would understand kind of at a glance what it is that you're proposing. I know that that probably sounds like a no-brainer, but again, we don't make any assumptions about, this might be the very last thing that you do, but it might be one of the very first things that is seen. So again, just be clear on your project title, be clear on your public agency that's applying. Um, Check the services that you provide and include a pretty decent project description. And again, it can be brief. Okay, so again, just going to do a real high level review of the proposal narrative. This is section 2 that begins on page 74. I'm not going to go through all of them, but again, because we've talked about the rating factors, we think it would be important just to flag what exactly it looks like and what the scoring panel will be considering. So right off the top, and the proposal narrative, there are instructions. So just the basics must be submitted in Arial 12 point font. And for those of you that are creative, we know when it's not Arial 12 point font, please don't do it. Please don't do it. Must be 15 pages in length. Now, that said, there are some attachments that we do allow you to include that do not impact your 15-page limit. And again, it will be those items that are on that proposal checklist. It would be the applicant information form. It would be the budget checklist. So, I mean, we're trying to the extent that we can provide true 15 pages of content. Other questions that we've received in the past, and so we've kind of built it in. You can include a one-page bibliography, but we ask that it conform to basic academic standards, be it APA or MLA format. Again, if that's something that would be of interest to you. When you're responding, again, assume the reader knows nothing about your proposal. And so in that vein, please title everything according to the headers that are provided. So if you see, which we're going to get into, it says project need or community engagement, please do use those same exact headings. The easier you make it for our scoring panel members, the easier it will be for you so that they're not trying to understand or to guess what section you are addressing. So again, just by way of an example, so if you look under under rating factor 1, which is project need, so right up top in the italicized, you'll see that it speaks to the total percent, and it's 15%. So again, we talked earlier about allocating your page length. If that's something that's of interest to you, then you can kind of budget that. And then the first few bulleted items, it kind of tells you up front. So here's what is going to be addressed in narrative form. And you can see for this particular section, again, just a few of them. So what are the needs? What's the target population? How are the needs identified? So again, certainly read through all that in great detail. What I also would like to show you is, so similar to the first round, we have included data sets for reference. So again, if you just, from the BSCC homepage, you click on Prop 47, and if you click on the very first Cohort 2 tab, if you just scroll down, it says publicly accessible data sets. Again, these are a reference point for you. You are welcome to use them. In the last round, we had some folks that use them, others choose to use other data sets. Again, we are just providing it to you as a reference point. We encourage you to use it if you think it's helpful in helping you to put together information about the services that you're providing. And then that said, and then on page 75 then, so still again with that project need, then you've got the writing criteria that will be used for that section. So again, if you look at 1.1, the need is identified and measurable. The applicant uses qualitative and quantitative data to support the description, et cetera, and et cetera. And you'll see that it's listed as 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Again, these are the guides that are kind of put in place there. But I say that to say that this format, carries throughout the duration of the proposal narrative section. So if you look at community engagement, it's the same thing. It begins up top. This section has a total value of 20%. You have the bulleted items beneath it. Then you've got the criteria. It comes up a lot, so I'm just going to acknowledge it. On page 76, project description, we know that it's a longer section. We understand that. Just want to publicly acknowledge that. And yes, I'm going to still say right as that you have a 15 page limit. So it is what it is. It's worth 25% of that section. But again, look at that rating criteria. Look at those bulleted items. Look at 3.1 through 3.10. And we're not telling you that you should craft your proposal only to speak to the bullet items, but just be mindful of them when you're putting it together. And again, I won't go through all of them because it carries through, but you get the gist of it. What I will pull your eyes to, though, is on page 80, the budget section, just because that's a two-parter. So again, although the budget section has a narrative component, again, there's also the Excel component, which I've showed you before. So I just say that as a reminder to please access the BSCC website to download the budget table, submit it. We always provide the caveat, and you'll see it in the budget section. The terminology that we use says, for example, in the fields, salaries and benefits, services and supplies, professional services, et cetera, et cetera. If you are successful, those are the terms that will be used in the budget and in your grant agreement. We recognize that locally you may use other terms, or that as a sub-provider you may use other terms. However, for the purposes of this RFP, this is the terminology that we're asking you to use. So please don't change those terms. So just again to cover some key dates, and then we'll open it up for questions. So again, the RFP was released on the 18th of January. Non-binding notices of intent to apply, are due on February 18th, so about a month apart. And the proposals are due March 18th by 5 p.m. That doesn't mean 5:30, 5:45. Other words of wisdom that we'll share. It's due on March 18th. Doesn't mean you have to wait until March 18th. I totally understand that you guys are writing the proposals. I'm not. I don't mean it to be tongue in cheek. But all that to say, we've had in the past folks drive up. And after a certain point, our staff just may not be here. So please, if you do plan on making that drive or do plan on submitting it on that day, leave early if you have to, plan accordingly, but they are due by 5 p.m. and it must be signed. Again, now, so in terms of some of the other components in the process, the proposal rating and development process, again, that includes the training of the scoring panel and the whole review process will occur somewhere between March and June of this year. And some of those dates are already online for scoring panel members, but we may add or we may need to modify dates. So that's why we're giving you just a range here. We anticipate that the board will consider the funding recommendations made by the scoring panel at either its June or July meeting. Again, the grant does not begin until we anticipate August 15, 2019. Either way, successful and those that are not as fortunate will be notified in June or July again once the board has given us that. The other thing I should go back and mention about the scoring panel, once we do list the scoring panel membership online, please do not contact the scoring panel. We appreciate that you are in your mind just trying to do the best you can to get as much information. I ask that you just direct all communication to our Prop 47 inbox, which I'll put up shortly, and the staff will address those questions. Although many of you have my telephone number, it might be easier, at least for now, if we just submit everything in writing so we can just get the verbiage down. It doesn't mean I won't talk to you on the phone, but I may still ask you, or the staff might still ask you to resubmit it in writing, just so that we can get the spirit of your question. I'm sorry, just so that we don't get the spirit of the question, but the actual content of your question as well. Again, new grants are, just to be safe, we say plan for August 15, 2019. That assumes budget's passed, everything's signed on time, and there will be a mandatory new grantee orientation in September 2019 with the date to be determined. So we'll pause again and see if there are any other questions.
Two questions from the live stream. And Andrea asked if we could post the answer to the diagnosis question on the website.
Yes.
We will be doing frequently asked questions. And then Joseph asked, the budget narrative does not count toward the 15-page max, correct?
Thank you, Joseph. Yes, the budget narrative is limited to 6 pages. And if you look at page 80 and 81, Joseph, in the instructions, you'll see that as well. So yes, there's 15 pages for the proposal narrative and 6 pages for the budget narrative. Any other questions? Thank you. And yet, yes, please.
Christine Barker, Fresno. For the other funds leveraged, how exact and will those be audited? Do we need to be, like, if we're thinking about Drug Medi-Cal or we're thinking about MHSA, the amount that ends up being used for any one person in the program might be above or beyond what we project at this point in time. So how closely is that going to be monitored,
Sure, thank you.
audited?
Yes, and for those online, the question is for leverage funds, how accurate should they be and how closely will they be monitored? So I think for the most part, we would say, so I get 2 different questions. So I'd say it's your proposal. So give us your close to as accurate as you can. I mean, we understand that it's going to be just that. It could be that it ends up that it's over or it's under for reasons that may be beyond your control. But know that the budget section in totality is rated. But it doesn't mean that staff doesn't have some flexibility. If the numbers that are proposed versus what they actually end up being are significantly off, we may need to have some subsequent conversations, which we've had with existing grantees. But I would say make your close to as healthiest proposal that you can. And then in terms of monitoring it, we are monitoring the funds the same way we would monitor the grant funds. But by that I mean, if, for example, on your grant funds, your claim in time, for example, we would ask that you keep, some type of supporting documentation that says, here's what we're claiming and here's what supports these costs. And it would be something similar for the leverage funds. We've taken a kind of a case by case example with each of them, but by and large, there should just be supporting documentation that's maintained locally if you're successful for any of the grant and or leverage funds that are claimed.
I'd like to clarify too, though, that there's a 50%, grantees are required to have a 50% leverage. So you can't go below that. And if you commit to 60 or 70%, you'll be awarded extra points in the process. So you can't go below those either if if you are awarded and those extra points came into play. So as Ricardo said, we'll work with you, but we're going to be looking at those thresholds and whether those affected your score, those 60 and 70%.
Okay, so to clarify, the entire project budget, which includes the leveraged funds, needs to be coming from community-based organizations?
No.
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 The
Okay, so
leveraged
the
funds can come
grant
from the
The
grantee.
grant amount, 50% needs to go to CB or to
At a
community-based
minimum,
organizations.
right,
Yes,
yes.
50, 70 plus is more.
Right. And if you leverage more than that,
Uh-huh.
enough to qualify for
Oh,
points.
I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
misspoke.
sorry.
The
Yeah.
50%
Yeah.
is the pass-through
Right.
requirement.
Yeah.
I
It's okay.
apologize. I'm getting mixed up.
Okay.
I'll be.
No, you're fine. No,
thank
no,
you
no, you're
for
fine.
that clarification.
But does that clarify?
Yes. that
Okay.
makes-
Other questions from the public or the live stream? All right, so just a quick summary, and then I'll turn it back over for just a wrap up. So again, just the basics. Proposals are due by March 18th, and again, we talked about that a hard copy and the electronic copy that are signed. And again, that's by 5 p.m. Submit questions to our inbox, prop47@bscc.ca.gov. We will collect all the FAQs and we will respond to questions through February 28th. And we will post them up to March 4th, 2019, which is about 2 weeks before the RFP is due. There's another bidders conference on Monday in Los Angeles, 9:30, as we referenced earlier. That meeting will not be live streamed. However, this live stream will be available on our website as well if you need to go back and rewatch. And again, we will certainly post the FAQs once we have enough of them relatively soon as well.
Any other staff want to add or say anything else? Okay. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I'm very happy that Ricardo reminded everyone that Monday's LA meeting will not be live streamed. Wow, that's a whole lot to digest today. I know everybody will have their proposals ready by tomorrow. So simple. A couple of things. I think though I've only been on the board a short period of time, I think I can say this very freely that the board members want all these programs to work. The board members want to award these grants, though they're challenging. They really want to make sure that the money goes to the people who are supposed to get it. So I want to encourage you, please, after you've gone back to your offices and digested all this and finished swearing, say, oh yeah, this is doable because they've laid out everything for us. This is a state agency. This is the government. We have to be accountable. And we especially have to be accountable for the work that we do. So I hope you don't consider these as barriers once you've digested them. And the staff truly, truly wants to help you. It is better to go online to ask them questions as opposed to calling them and leaving messages. But I can't tell you how much we really want these programs and your programs to succeed, making sure that you meet all the deadlines and you dot all the I's and cross all the T's. Now, having said that, is there anything else any question anyone wants to ask right now? Because the staff people are here face to face. Is there anything that you forgot that you may want to add? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentations. I mean, all of you, really. I'm just speechless. Really, thank you very much. Thank all of you for coming. We're looking forward to getting those applications on time, long before the March date. We'd love to see them, get them in by March 1st. And good luck to you. Good luck to you. I hope that everything works out for all of you. And thanks very much for coming.